Declan, I wanted to change the subject for a while because apart from politics that you are involved in and was involved for a very long time, you are also an entrepreneur who is actually trying to build a thing that is incredible in a way. And the idea behind your company, Rivada, is an idea of creating a, correct me if I'm wrong, alternative internet in case something big, something bad happens in the world. Could you walk our viewers through the idea of the company that you are running?
Certainly. So, and there's an interesting history, if I say so myself, to it, because we got into a massive fight with Communist China over this because they wanted to do this. What we are doing is we have designed, and by the way, there's some brilliant Polish engineers involved in this, we have designed and are deploying a 600 satellite constellation in polar orbit. So that means that the orbit of the satellites go from the North Pole to the South Pole and back up again. And there's approximately 25 satellites in each ring, in each polar orbital plane that goes around the planet. And when we fully deployed, there will be 24 rings of these satellites going around the planet. And each satellite has got 4 lasers on it, and is also what they call a router, or as Americans say, a router, which route the data traffic in the most efficient manner, depending on where it's going. This creates, if you like, think of like a fishing net moving around the planet all of the time. That is a mesh of lasers at 1,050 kilometers in altitude. And then we use a band of the radio spectrum called the Ka band to go from the terminal on your vehicle or your building or whatever up to the Outernet. This is a completely self-contained global laser mesh.
The term that you are using, Outernet, for this network.
Because it doesn't touch the internet. So really interestingly, there is no single global communications network. The internet and every global communications network you can think of is a patchwork quilt of other people's networks all stitched together. But there isn't a single network per se. This is why you have this VPN, virtual private network. You can never have an actual private network or a real private network on a global basis because nobody can put something global together. This will be the first truly global, completely self-contained network. Even Starlink, Kuiper as it's designed, other satellite constellations, they all use the internet because what happens...
Could you explain the difference? Because when we are thinking about the Starlink, which is the first thing that comes to mind of people interested in technology when you talk about the satellite constellation, what is the difference? What is the way that Starlink works connecting to the internet, and what is the difference between Outernet that you are working on?
Well, first of all, to say Starlink's an excellent satellite internet service. It's excellent. And the way that it works is Starlink has thousands of satellites at approximately 350, 400 kilometers, so lower than where ours will be. And what happens with Starlink is you go up to the satellite, and the satellite then looks to offload that traffic onto the closest ground gateway. So it's looking back to Earth to find the closest ground gateway to the satellite. And then it sends your traffic onto the internet. So it sends... That signal goes up, it's at the satellite looks for a place to land it at the nearest ground gateway, lands the signal in the ground gateway, and then the ground gateway takes it to its end destination on the internet. All of those ground gateways are connected to the subsea cables, the same internet that everything else is connected to. And there's nothing wrong with that, it works fine. Except for if something happens to the internet. So this is something that, of course, one can never say this will happen, but I think there is an extremely high risk that the Kremlin, Beijing, even non-state actors at some point are going to target the internet, because the internet, the arteries of the internet are approximately 500 subsea cables. These are underwater cables. There's about 500 of them. That's it.
That's not a big number.
On the whole planet.
If we are talking about the states like Russia, like China, Iran, North Korea, those are the states that are capable of attacking this kind of subsea infrastructure. We see it on the Baltic Sea all the time. Chinese ships are trying to destroy those cables. Well, there are many cases of this kind of threat. So internet, in that way, you claim, could be switched off if a kind of a global crisis occurs?
Yes.
What about Outernet?
Yeah, the Outernet can't be because it doesn't touch the internet. So so let's take, to your example, the Baltic Sea. So we saw those ships dragging anchor, snapping cables, absolutely deliberately.
Claiming this.
We didn't. And that's what will happen. And you don't need to have brilliant subsea technology. You need a really good chain and an anchor. That will do it. And there's even simpler ways than that, I'm afraid to say, of doing it. These things are not hard to break. And if you break them in more than one place, you have an even bigger problem, because then the ocean currents will start to move the broken sections, and then you have to replace them. There's all sorts of issues. So for very, very little cost, and there's millions of kilometres of length of these cables, 500 odd cables laid around the world. If you cut all the subsea cables, the internet goes dark. Everything downstream of the internet goes dark. Every broadcaster, every payment system, every credit card, you name it, fuel distribution, food distribution, logistics, transport, traffic lights. The downstream consequences of losing the internet are utterly catastrophic. And if you wanted to invade, let's say, Taiwan, for example, whoever might want to do that, and you could make the world go dark, and it would stay dark for many, many weeks.
So the time you need to run the operation.
Well, think about this, and your viewers should think about this. Let's say, in a minute from now, your phone doesn't work anymore. Your TV stops working. You can't make a phone call. You can't reach your family members. And by the way, everyone should have a contingency for what happened, where they should all meet, where they all go to in an event like this. Because, and then the last thing that you're going to be thinking that day or the day after or the week after is what's happening in Taiwan. And now we see this alliance axis that has developed as Russia has become, got sucked into China's orbit and is becoming, tragically, a client state of China, where China has the potential to use Russia, and it's already doing this in an intelligence, from an intelligence standpoint, but as a proxy to act in its interests. I mean, China keeps the Ukraine war going by supplying and propping up Russia's economy and supplying Russia with so many essential of its essential needs. The probability and risk of something like this happening is immense. So what does the Outernet do? The Outernet will not be able to carry all of the traffic of the internet. You're not going to be able to send cat pictures or, FaceTime your mum. But the Outernet will have enough capacity to carry the most critical communications: government, secure communications, banking, payment systems, settlements. That's vital media. That sort of thing can be sustained where a small percentage, but the most important percentage of global communications traffic can be sustained and maintained in the absence of the internet. If the internet goes down because of a massive cyber attack, or frankly, more likely, a physical attack on its most vulnerable choke points, which is those subsea cables.
I got two more questions regarding this issue. I'll start with the one that you were actually talking publicly about it. There is an article in Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago. You mentioned it over there. You mentioned it also on the Trigonometry podcast. There are only a couple of ships in the world capable of repairing under the subsea cables of internet, and you claim that those ships and the people who are doing that are basically the target of the international, well, intelligence community. Those people could be targeted when this kind of thing happens. People usually don't think about this kind of aspects of the ongoing normal thing. We have our telephone, as you mentioned, working. We don't think about the credit cards system operating over the internet. What are the threats connected to this kind of things right now?
This is Declan Ganley's theory, okay? I don't have intelligence on this. I haven't discussed this with you. This is my theory. But it's underpinned by things I know to be true and factual. So I know, for example, that Europe's 4G and 5G networks are horrendously compromised by China. The Salt Typhoon...
They're basically designed by China.
They're literally equipped by China in many cases, where we have this Huawei equipment that's being deployed. I, by the way, vigorously campaigned to try and stop that from happening. For the last several years, if you look into my history, I was screaming about how crazy this issue was. I mean, where China has got the most sophisticated intelligence gathering operation in human history, where they can get a level of granular information on stuff that's going on in your house that you don't even know about, okay? And that's true for anybody. So if you have an ENO-B on a cellular network that's Huawei equipped, where it's being maintained and all the software patches are being upgraded and maintained daily sometimes from China. And if you look through the contracts they say, oh, no, that's not happening. It's happening. And where the software updates are being done out of Shanghai or another part of China, and that ENO-B is in your village or your town, and it's looking at your house, and they know where you live. They know what your kids are looking at on their phones. They know who they're calling and everything else. Now, let's fast forward that into subsea cable. Why does that matter? By the way, it's more than a couple of ships, but it's a small number of ships. I won't say the number, but it's really scarily small, the number of ships that do this subsea cable laying. And the people that know how to splice and actually do the work that's involved is, let's just say, it's not an army.
Yeah, it's a crew of those ships.
it's a
on the 2 or 3 ships.
It's a small,
you can
very
count the number.
small group of people, and I think that what we saw happen over the last few months with these cable cuts in Europe and in the Red Sea and off the coast of Taiwan was an operation watching what happens, who gets called, who gets an email, who phones who, where were they, what are they driving, what do they do, how long does it take them to get to the ship, how do they go out there, what airline do they use.
What time takes from the moment that the cable was destroyed to the moment that the ship repaired it.
So they have all of that information. They know where all of these people live. They know what what was the last restaurant that they dined in. And that level of intelligence information, when you want to take down the internet, is the stuff of a Tom Clancy novel, of a particularly terrifying one in terms of what could be done. And the likelihood that they're not going to do this, I mean, we saw a Russian fleet and then individual Russian ships parked over subsea cable infrastructure off the Irish coast over the course of the last few months. We've seen the same thing in the Baltic. We see the same thing in the Red Sea.
I think in the Great Britain was the same.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Story between Sweden.
And the thing is you don't need to have a nuclear submarine or, this is like the Houthis were, of course, I'm sure they got help, but even the Houthis were cutting subsea cables in the Red Sea over the course of the last number of months. So even a non-state actor could do this. So I think, it's time to say this, and I am starting to say this because it's like not enough is being done about it. I've run the numbers on this, and for less than $60 million, probably a lot less, and I use the number 60 because that's a very, very safe number. So 60 million in cash could take down the internet for probably 2 years.
It's incredible. Declan, thank you very much for your time, your presence at Telewizja Republika. I hope that we're going to have a chance to talk about all those interesting issues again, and hopefully we see each other soon.
It's been a
Thanks a lot.
pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. This is Telewizja Republika. This is the home of the free speech.